At the beginning of Return of the Jedi, we see Jabba the Hutt's palace with its many slaves, illegal animals, and wanted criminals. We're even shown how droids are tortured and how Jabba intends to execute Han, Luke, and Leia. And in general, the Hutts weren't exactly known for their clean business dealings. This raises the question of why the Empire didn't take action against Jabba, other Hutts, and Hutt space to put an end to these illegal activities. And that's exactly what we'll look at in this video. To answer the question of why the Empire didn't take action against the Hutts, we first need to look at the situation the Hutts and also the Empire found themselves in when the Empire was newly founded. The Clone Wars, which had gripped the galaxy for 3 years, had just ended when Chancellor Palpatine proclaimed the First Galactic Empire and declared himself Emperor. Many worlds were devastated and needed to be rebuilt, and there were still enough separatists who refused to surrender and continued to try to fight against the Empire. Thus, from the very beginning, the Empire was faced with the problem of financing the reconstruction of the galaxy to prevent possible revolts, while at the same time building a large army and navy to defeat the remaining separatists and hinder any revolt right from the start. To tackle both problems, the Empire needed a lot of credits, and thus had few resources or troops available to oppose the Hutts, even if the Empire had wanted to. The Hutts, on the other hand, had largely officially stayed out of the Clone Wars, which meant that the planets in the relatively large territory controlled by the Hutts weren't really devastated by the Clone Wars. At the same time, the Clone Wars had certainly helped the Hutts, as they were able to smuggle and illegally sell a great deal of weapons and war supplies at very high prices, sometimes to both sides. Despite their smaller empire, the Hutts were in a really good position right from the start of the Empire. And when the Galactic Empire first demanded taxes from the Hutts paid immediately. The Hutts were very skilled politicians who hoped to remain unmolested by the Empire if they just agreed to their terms. They knew that while the Empire couldn't afford to start a war with the Hutts at the beginning of its reign, the Empire's power both militarily and economically would grow rapidly in a very short time. So the Hutts accepted the Empire's terms, paid their very expensive taxes, but in return remained unmolested. But even when the Imperial military was at its peak and could have easily conquered the Hutt Empire, the Empire did nothing, at least in legends, not so much in canon. Crushing the Hutts and their criminal organizations would have done more harm than good to the Empire. First of all, the Hutts controlled a large portion of the outer and mid-rim markets, which, if they were to collapse after the Hutts' fall, would also seriously destabilize the rest of the galaxy's markets. Furthermore, the Empire would lose one of its largest sources of tax revenue. Of course, this would prevent many of the Hutts' illegal activities, but these were largely focused on the outer rim worlds anyway, which for the most part were neither strategically nor politically valuable to the Empire. So if the Hutts had been defeated by the Empire and their empire overthrown, the Galactic Empire would also have lost the Hutts' immense income. The Empire would then have to establish imperial administrators and in some cases governments and garrisons on every single Hutt planet, which might not be able to generate anywhere near as much taxation as the Hutts for decades to come. At this time, the first militant uprisings also began on many other planets, keeping the Imperial military busy. The Empire could therefore never simply afford a war against a relatively friendly Hutt Empire, which financed a large part of the Empire and if destroyed would have massively destabilized the galaxy's market. Moreover, the Hutts were simply slimy scoundrels. At the heart of their empire they hoarded a great deal of wealth, but also had defense fleets that could dish out plenty of damage. And while the Hutts enjoyed doing a lot of business in their own territory and concentrated on the outer and mid-rim, they certainly had tentacles that reached into the heart of the galaxy and could potentially cause serious damage in a large-scale attack. That's why they were mostly left alone. And if you want to learn more about the Empire's war machinery, watch this 50 facts video about the Empire's ships and navy here in the end card. May the Force be with you and have a great day.